This happened in Iraq years ago. A member of our squad, who we'll call Daniel, was a bit out of character. One week, he started complaining that he kept seeing something in his night vision goggles. We were out on night patrol in the city, and he wasn't sure what it was. He said it wasn't human or anything, so it didn't raise suspicion. We just thought Daniel was messing around or something. A few days go by, and after another night patrol, he can't sleep and is sweating heavily. He's freaking the heck out, so we ask him, "Dude, what's wrong? What's going on? Are you alright?" His response was something I'll never forget. He said, You guys aren't gonna believe this, but Death is following me." He went on to talk about a shadowy figure floating from rooftop to rooftop, following our patrol. He said it was only visible through the night vision goggles and not seen by the streetlights or anything. If you've ever been to Iraq and you use night vision goggles and just watch the sky, sometimes there's weird flashes that you can't explain. We figure it's satellites or drones or something when we see them though. But Daniel was serious about everything he said, but we still thought he was messing around. The very next day, Daniel was killed in action. Freaked out my whole platoon, and we didn't even know what to say about it all. We were just scared. Back in the 70s, my mom was a teenager living in Houston. She and her 9 siblings lived in the Heights, which she says is a nice neighborhood now, but at the time it was kind of a slum. Anyways, my mom had a crush on one of her brother's friends. She was around 14 or 15 at the time, and he was a few years older. His name was Mark, and she was smitten and in love. Well, around this time, boys in the neighborhood started disappearing. They weren't leaving notes or telling anyone that they were leaving. The families were calling the police, but they weren't doing anything about the situation. The police had simply said the boys had ran away and left it at that, never looking into it further. After all, these were poor families in a rough area, so kids run away all the time, right? Life goes on, the chief of police said to the parents. One day, my mom's crush Mark disappears too. Meanwhile, my mom's brother is hitching a ride to the beach to go fishing. He did this on a regular basis and would bum a ride from anyone. He manages to get picked up by a guy who happens to be low on gas. They stop to fill up on gas, and the guy working at the gas station is named Weird Larry. Well, Larry sees my uncle and asks who he's riding with. My uncle replies that he doesn't actually know the guy, so Larry doesn't let him ride with him any further. He made my uncle get out of the car and scolded him about hitching rides. The driver goes on without him, onto who knows where. 3 years later, we found something out. A man had been paying 2 boys to lure teenage boys to his house. When they got to his house, he drugged them, then strapped them to a wooden board. The man would then torture them for hours and violate them unmercifully. After he was done with them, he would kill them and hide the bodies. There were 28 victims, and Mark Scott was one of them. The only reason they found out is because the 2 teenagers murdered the serial killer. After they did this, they told the police about all of the murders and led them to some of the bodies. It creeps me out to this day, because one of them is the driver that picked up my uncle. long time ago, I was in an accident that was pretty bad. It was a horrific scene that left slim chance for survival. But somehow, I made it. I was able to leave the hospital shortly after, and lived a great life for many years. I didn't suffer any damage from the accident. I met a nice girl and even settled down. I remember everything so vividly, from the moments I woke up to the moments I went to sleep. One night, I went to sleep with my family, and everything was great. Then when I woke up, there were two people standing over me. They were yelling at me and pointing lights in my face. I couldn't tell what was going on, and I couldn't even breathe. I thought maybe I was having a nightmare, but that wasn't the case. The two people standing over me were doctors, and they were pulling a tube out of my throat. Basically, that accident I was in, I never left the hospital like I thought. I had actually been in a coma for 3 weeks of my life, and none of those years were real. Everything about it was a coma dream. And now I struggle with reality ever since. I was about 12 years old and woke up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. I walked across the hall to our little bathroom and hit the lights. I was about to reach the toilet when I glanced up and saw something. I saw a face. I saw a face in the mirror that wasn't mine. It was as if someone was on the other side, standing to the right, with their face right next to the glass, staring right at me with the creepiest wide-open eyes. I only saw it for the briefest moment, but it was seared into my brain. I screamed and ran out there for my dad. My dad went to investigate and then calm me down, or at least he tried his best to. We had a prayer session because I was so freaked out, and eventually I went back to sleep. Fast forward to my 30s, I'd forgotten all about the event. One night while visiting, my dad quietly brings it up. "You remember that one time you saw that face in the mirror?" It suddenly came back to me in a rush of memory, sending a chill down my spine. Yeah, I remember why," I replied. "Well, I sometimes still think about that night." He looked down at the floor with a serious expression. "I saw it too." He went on to describe the exact same thing I saw. Apparently, when he went to investigate, he saw it and had a freak out of his own. The prayer session we had was as much for his own nerves as mine. I respect him for keeping this to himself until my 30s, but I kinda wish he'd never told me. On January 1st, 2005, a Ukrainian teenage girl named Masha put on her makeup and headed out to a New Year's Eve party. The party was located in the Odessa Catacombs, where they would drink the night away and dance to music. Amidst the partying and fun, Masha got separated from her friends in the tunnels of the catacombs. With no cell phone reception in the 2,500-kilometer catacombs, she had no choice but to search for them. Eventually, the battery on her phone gives out, and she has no flashlight. She's lost and alone in a giant series of tunnels with nothing but cold, damp walls and eerie silence. The only thing she heard was her own footsteps and crying, her own voice echoing back to her, pleading for help. She was left all alone, with her fears and regrets, when just hours prior, she was partying with her friends. One day bleeds into the next, and her calls into the darkness go unanswered. Her hope of rescue begins to wane No one is listening to her prayers as she scurries the halls of the dead. The air is cold, and she's parched, scared, hungry, and tired. Slowly she realized that was the place she was going to die. She spent 3 days in those tunnels, only to choke on every bit of her existence. She went through the anger, the denial, the bargaining, all until she was too tired to carry on. Dizzy, and her head throbbing, she collapsed and died of dehydration. It took police 2 years to recover her body. One of the scariest things was Masha's body was found not too far from an exit, which is where explorers spotted her remains. The air was so cold, it had partially mummified her corpse. If anyone went through a form of hell on earth, it was this poor girl.